Hello and welcome to this week's Preps Preview. Alongside Justin Conn, I'm Aren Dow. A lot of really big games this past week. And let's start out with Macarthur Lincoln, because I think, with Lincoln, kind of this, power for a very long time, Macarthur goes into Lincoln and ends up getting a win. I know you saw that game.
Honestly, it was the best game I've seen this season as far as sort of the combination of quality of play plus exciting at the end. It was a lot of fun to watch. And, of course, Lincoln always has a great atmosphere for basketball. And then, Macarthur brought a nice crowd. And, there just haven't been many times. Of course, there was a turkey tournament this year, but there haven't been many times where Macarthur they've had a lot of close calls. Of course, they had the regional game last year at Lincoln where they've played real well and lost in games like that. But that was a game where you just kind of got used to over the years Macarthur losing those games, and they went in and flat out beat Lincoln. They were the better team. It was close, and there were some things that happened late that sort of where you thought, boy, they just gave Lincoln an opening. But they played well enough on defense to keep Lincoln from taking advantage of it. I thought they had a really smart plan on Gavin Block, Lincoln's star player. At this point, Lincoln is very reliant on him. I mean, it's not like last year's team where you had, Ed Albee, who was a six guy who could just, bury threes and a division.
So could Max Cook.
And a Division I point guard in Max Cook. They just don't have those guys around Block right now. They have guys that play smart Lincoln basketball, but it's just not that. It's a team where you can focus your defense on Block and say, okay, you other guys beat us, and they weren't able to beat a Macarthur team that then had a guy step up in Terry Bond, who of course had the trouble early in the season from the fight at Springfield Landfair. He misses a bunch of games, and then even when he comes back, he's not really a factor. And then here all of a sudden in these last few games, you start seeing him in the box score, and you're like, okay, and then seeing what he could do against Lincoln, and it's like they already have Kemontae Johnson and Kamari Jones and Dallas McClain and Shontrez Bates, and now you've added him into the mix, and he was just kind of sitting in the holes in the zone, in Lincoln's zone, and killing them.
Yeah, you brought up, winning big games. I think that's a thing, you have winning the turkey tournament, and they had that stumble against Granite City in Collinsville, but they end up, taking the Constellation Championship in Collinsville, and then they beat Lincoln in Lincoln. I mean, they've had some big games that you can point to throughout the season where I think it's a little bit different than the past couple of years, where you're like, okay, I can definitely see this team winning a regional and, getting to those points where there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of energy in those gyms that they can handle it.
And it's been a while since the Decatur team has played in a game. They've won a couple of regionals, Macarthur has in the past few years, but where you really thought, okay, they have something to play for now. It's not just, maybe they can go in and play spoiler or go in and pull the big upset. Now, they're going to go into the games and be legitimately feared. And they have, this was on a night, they beat Lincoln. Kemontae Johnson didn't, I won't say he didn't play well, but his shots weren't falling.
Yeah.
Because he still had a ton of rebounds, but his shots weren't falling. He got, he got in a little foul trouble, and the guys. There have been a lot of of nights where he's carried them. Well, his teammates were able to kind of carry him, through a bad night and against Lincoln. So that was it was a lot of fun to watch, and seeing the Macarthur fans and the players and coaches after that game, and the smiles on their faces. That was a lot of fun to watch.
Well, you talk about Terry Bond. I mean, not only just the team having to learn a new offense under Ingram, but at least those guys had played with each other. Terry Bond's transferred in. He hadn't played with those guys before, so I think it took. He had one really good game in the turkey tournament, but it kind of took some time to not only learn a whole new system, but to gel with everybody. I think you've seen that in the last couple of weeks, where he's had a couple of really good games, and this was the best one so far.
Right, and it wasn't a forced thing. I mean, he let it come to him, and it was just good, smart basketball all night from them. And then at the end of the game, Lincoln is down. It's close. They decided we're going to have to extend our zone. And, man, Macarthur carved it up. I mean, it was really impressive to watch. It's just one of those things where you're like, you see that and you're like, okay, this team is definitely for real. And I felt that way before that. But then, they had a couple stumbles. They lost to Glenwood and hadn't played necessarily really well against Eisenhower. But then you see that and you're like, okay, I'm with this team right now. This is definitely a really exciting team and something we haven't seen in Decatur in a while. They're 15-5, which is the best record a team has had since, of course, the 2007-8 Eisenhower team. And I'm not comparing this team to that team, but the excitement, around a Decatur team, I would say this is, as optimistic as I've been about a Decatur team since that team.
The other very big game, we had Monticello host Warrensburg, undefeated Warrensburg at the time. They get the win, able to beat the Cardinals, 54-50. Monticello, it's always a team that starts a little bit late because the football team, usually, gets into the playoffs and they, play a couple rounds. So a late start, haven't played too many games. I mean, they've only played 15 or so in the season, but they get a really good win, beating Warrensburg, and it's different. I mean, it's not quite the same Monticello team we've seen the past couple of years. It's more centered around guard play. I mean, even last year where you had Stokowski, I mean, a lot of his points came inside, and a different kind of team under Kevin Roy this year.
Right, and they hadn't really they had a nice record going into the game. I think they were 12-3 going into that game. They hadn't had that quality win. I had seen them earlier in the season against Argenta. They had a big run at the end of the game to beat them. And I thought, okay, this is a kind of a fun team, but as far as being capable of being a team like Warrensburg, the win shocked me, no question about it. And they had been receiving votes in the 2A poll, and I know both of us were like, what are people seeing out of Monticello? And
it was more just like they didn't have the resume yet.
Right,
they really hadn't beaten a whole lot of really good teams so far.
Right, and then that obviously is a win. We're like, okay, okay, I was wrong, and we talked about. I've always felt like Warrensburg's weakness would be, size. They don't have. They're not big. They maybe, some teams with some really dominant post players could come in and give them trouble. But Monticello doesn't have that. They just they have the good guards, and it seems like they were able to control Warrensburg's press enough to where turn it into a half court game. I like Warrensburg in a half court, but they have won a lot of games this year. Forcing turnovers with their press and getting up and down the court and scoring in transition. Vic Binkley had kind of expressed to me that he didn't love the way the team was transitioning into half-court offense, just going from one end of the floor to the other, and maybe that's something that came back to haunt him.
Yeah, and I think it's the rebounding. I think maybe played a little bit of an effect to it. But you look at it seems like offensively Warrensburg kind of do what they always do. I mean, they had a pretty even scoring across the table. I mean, they had several guys in double figures. It seemed like the rebounding kind of got to them a little bit, and Monticello was able to score. I mean, they were able to score every single quarter. It was consistent. It wasn't like Warrensburg kind of, I think a lot of times has that one quarter where they can just shut teams down, and they didn't do that against Monticello. Monticello took advantage of that.
Right, and I think this is the time of year where you'll start seeing scores like this. Now sometimes you'll say, okay, this was just a blip, and they'll get it back, like with Meridian a few years ago when they lost to Sullivan in the regular season. But sometimes it can be somebody's found a weakness, and then the team or a team peaked too early. So it's not like you can just totally dismiss this as it's a blip. I do feel like that's probably the case for Warrensburg.
Agreed.
But we'll see. They have the CIC tournament coming up now, and that's not going to be easy. There will be at least one tough game for them in that, and so we'll see how they play going forward. There was another sort of a game like that for Teutopolis losing to Mount Zion last night. That's a great win for Mount Zion, and with T-Town, they played such a tough schedule that I think there's going to be nights when you play 3A teams and top 2A teams that you're going to have some losses. I really do feel the same way. That's a blip, but that is 2 straight losses for T-Town. So they had lost to Breeze Central on Saturday. So, I guess we'll see going forward. But this is a time of year where you'll see these games like this, and it's kind of depends on the teams respond, I guess.
Yeah, and now we're getting into the tournament play, and like you said, the CIC tournament for the boys' side starts Saturday, and it starts with Warrensburg, and so that'll be at St. Teresa for that whole tournament. And I think between Warrensburg and St. T, those are the two teams that are pretty heavily favored. I think there's definitely teams. I mean, this is a deep tournament. I would say that a couple teams can make that run and get an upset, but I think those two teams are the favorite, and we'll see. I mean, it's been weird the last couple of years. We've had an underdog that's kind of made it and won the tournament the last couple of years in Meridian, and then Sullivan. So I don't know who you see kind of as the dark horse this tournament that could maybe upset one of those two teams.
This is not necessarily a dark horse, but Meridian, I think, is a team that always seems to do something in this tournament. I would say, and I think they've played in a championship of it, the last couple of years, and they lost to, I believe they were the ones that lost to Sullivan last year, and then they had beaten St. Teresa in a pretty controversial game the year before that. And history tells us that there's going to be an upset. I don't see it. I think it's going to be St. T in Warrensburg in this championship game, the first of what could be 3 tries with those teams, and it just right now it just feels like those 2 teams are just, they have it together more than the other teams do.
And I'm not going to lie. I want to see these 2 teams play. It's been so long into the season. I feel like these teams should have played each other by now. But it is a little weird that they haven't played. But to see a Warrensburg St. T matchup should be a ton of fun. 'Cause I feel like both those teams move the ball so well, and I don't know how Warrensburg is going to handle Christian Williams' size a little bit. Those are 2 very complete teams, and there's so many factors that go into that. I'm looking forward to see if that does happen to be the championship game.
Yeah, I mean that's a game, especially since Christian has come back to the lineup that all of us are dying to see. So hopefully we get that. Of course, and there's several tournaments going on right now. In the LOVC on Friday night, we'll have the Northwest Division Championship. The winner of that will play the Southeast Division champion the next day. But just kind of as a singular tournament, this is the championship game of that, and it's LSA against Arthur Lovington, Atwood Hammond. Arthur's a team that came out of the gate and had some big wins early, and has played pretty steady throughout the season. And is, kind of we knew they were going to be good coming in, and they've been good. LSA, I think we thought, well, they should be pretty good coming in. They've had their ups and downs, but that was against a lot of 2A teams. Now that they're kind of in the LOVC, they looked really dominant against Cerro Gordo last night. Had a great conversation with Scott Bacon, Cerro Gordo's coach, after the game, where he said, if they play like that, nobody in this conference is beating them. And they have Hunter York, who's a big guy who's very athletic, and at the 1A level, there's not many of those. Yeah. So that causes some big mismatches. Plus, they have some pretty good guards, some shooters. It's a team that, I think I've had my trepidations about, through the course of the year because they've had some chemistry issues, but it seems like it's coming together.
Yeah, and that was a big thing, talking to LSA, they said, there was some things at the start of the season, and it's a little frustrating to lose to some of those 2A teams, but it's like, it's Williamsville and Warrensburg. I mean, these are very good 2A teams that they're going up against. Right. Like you said, I think they're playing very well as a team right now. Watched them against Arcola, and Arcola threw a boxing one at Hunter York and really tried to shut down that inside game, and Garrett Carson, is lights out from 3-pointers. Bryce Ellis was moving the ball really well. They have a lot of different options. I think, you have Ellis and York as the 2 guys that they get the points, but there's a lot of different options on the LSA team, and having Carson come off the bench and, midway through that first quarter provide some of that spark coming off the bench. I think that's a pretty dangerous team in 1A. And,
their regional, they're going to be the number 1 seed. It's extremely winnable. A&M is in that regional, and they had a close game against them early in the year, but I think that LSA has come a long way since that game. So, LSA is a team that is probably going to be reckoned with in the postseason. They could be, I know they're in the same sectional complex with Arthur. So this game could be, we can see this as a, sort of a preview to something that happens in the postseason as well. So that's a fun game on Friday. Another tournament going on is the National Trail Conference tournament. Just started last night. I should say on Tuesday night, and. Dietrich, I would think, is the heavy favorite, but St. Anthony is a nice team and could give them trouble. So, that's another definitely a storied tournament. That Altamont's a good team too, and I think that of all the tournaments, that's probably the one that always kind of has the most tradition behind it, and that championship game is always sort of an event. At Altamont, they play it there every year, so definitely we'll be keeping our eye on that one as well.
And you got the Little Illini tournament with the addition of Corey Carver coming back from that collarbone injury. The 7 seed, but mostly because of the record. But they've been able to work their way through the tournament, and Cody Hollinsby has played very well. We'll see how that team. Jason Hansen now in his second year really kind of got that team. I think maybe where he wants it. And we'll see if they can keep hitting those upsets. I mean, I think KC's a very good team, but we'll see if they can make it through the Little Illini tournament there.
Plenty of basketball coming up here, and then the next thing you know, it's going to be regionals. Make sure you check us out on Twitter and, of course, on hrpreps.com in the newspaper. We'll see you out there.